Welcome to Raising Consciousness with me, Lou Burrows, where raising human consciousness happens. On this show, I'm joined by guests to cover a range of topics and have conversations that will raise human consciousness for current and future generations. Now, let's dive into today's show. Hi everyone, welcome back to Raising Consciousness with me, your host, Lou Burrows. And today we have Rohan, who is joining us, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And that's what today's episode is going to basically be, guys, as a conversation between me and Rohan, because basically, like, we are, and I recently, like in most episodes, I've been mentioning Mind Valley, right? So, me and Rohan met through this platform called Mind Valley. I will link it down below in the description. And yeah, like, I don't even know, can't even remember how long it's been. When did we first connect on Mind Valley? I'm not sure. Can you remember?
It's been around 3 or 4 months, I believe.
Okay. Okay.
I don't remember the exact context with which we started talking, but we've been like keeping in touch.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was like through like somebody else, if that makes sense. You know, so like somebody else connected us, or maybe it was on like a quest circle that obviously they host. Or
Yeah,
something.
I guess like I wrote my insight regarding something that I went through in a quest. Oh, it was the Lisa Nichols quest about speaking, like
yes,
public speaking.
You have a good memory.
So
yeah, yeah, that was it. So actually, that must have been when did I take that quest? Obviously, I can probably find that out. That was wow. So that means it must be longer than 3 or 4 months, because I think I took that quest at the beginning of the year, or even like approaching a year, like December last year or something. Anyway, so like, yeah, we connected through this platform called Mind Valley, and then yeah, like been continuing to keep in touch with each other over Telegram. And in the past month, we had a catch-up call, basically, and we were discussing some interesting topics on there, on the call that we're having around consciousness, around this kind of balance between what I kind of refer to as wanting to like meditate all day, and then the other side of like wanting to go out into the world and just like, you know, make a huge difference. Vishen, who's actually the founder of Mind Valley, calls this Buddha and the Badass, so I'm going to probably refer to that quite a lot. So we were talking about consciousness, conscious living, and yeah, and just like a bunch of other stuff. And I think actually during the call, I was just like, actually, this would make a good podcast episode. You know, like, we just, you know, spoke about this on a podcast, I believe that it would help a lot of people. So, yeah, that's basically why I wanted to bring Rohan onto the show today. To, you know, so we're going to like continue this conversation. I guess it might be a bit different because obviously we're podcast recording at the same time, but it was a really interesting conversation. Before we go into that, Rohan, I would love to let the audience know a little bit more about yourself. So, yeah, who is Rohan? And yeah, how did you get into this research, this just like way of personal growth, you know, and into consciousness, I guess?
Okay, so hello to everyone listening and watching this podcast. My name is Rohan, and I'm from India. I live in this little city called Bangalore. So, formally, I've completed a bachelor's in physics, chemistry, and math. So I came from like a physical sciences approach, and like I had this huge drive thinking, you know, like I'll become a theoretical physicist, like, you know, like science is the way. So I was fully motivated on that path. Something drastically shifted after COVID, and I guess like many people sort of resonate with, like, they've had some sort of like a personal sort of shift that has hit them. They, like, you know, they start thinking about like bigger questions, like where's the world headed? Why is this happening? This is like a massive disruption. So I was also confronted with similar questions, and along with that, there were a lot of, I was confronted with like a personal sort of meaning quest as well. Like there was this disruption that happened. I was like, what is the meaning of life? Like, what is all this? And it was a very chaotic period. And ever since then, I had a fair bit of interest in philosophy, in Buddhist meditation techniques. So I used to try them out now and then. But it was during that particular phase of, the real sense of like raw quest for meaning that all of these practices actually came to be applied in a very concrete manner. And I started meditating. I started really understanding what meditation truly is at that particular period of time. Until then, I would just close my eyes, sit for a few minutes, and call it meditation. But then, to truly sense a sense of that depth of peace, or just sitting still and quieting the mind, that's something I only savored after that sort of that craving for meaning came about. So I have been I took a gap year from my studies because I did not think I could function in the world that well, because there was something else I had to tend to before. And I started sort of just full-time heading towards psychology, learning stuff on my own, spirituality, spiritual practices, especially the integration between spirituality and psychology. That's the sweet spot is something that interests me a lot. So I started listening to many podcasts and all that. And I also sort of, through a connection through one of my friend, he told me about someone else who's also into, stuff like this, like spirituality, psychology, merging all these things and all that. So it was through him that I got to know about Mindvalley. So he spoke about this platform called Mindvalley, how that has, changed his life, and just the programs there are really great for personal growth. And there are a lot of good things that he gained from that. And he sort of referred me to try out this one quest called Life Vision Mastery by Michael Beckwith.
That's really good. That's a really good one.
Yeah. So I heard about that after a couple of months after, getting to know about Mindvalley. I checked out that YouTube, saw a bunch of videos. I seemed to really like the content they were producing and signed up for it, did a few quests, and one after the other, started doing many other quests, and found that very, refreshing, very, the content was just very enlightening, and it had a huge impact on every, the questions that I was asking. It sort of perfectly resonated with those things and gave me a lot of, it was a catalyst for my personal growth. So ever since then, I've been on Mindvalley and been doing various quests, and that's how I came to meet you. So
yes,
that's about me.
Excellent, man. So yeah, as I mentioned before, we were having this conversation probably about a month ago now, which actually led to us having these kind of weekly, and then calls out every other week around a quest called Silver Ultraminds, which is basically how would you describe it? I find this work sometimes very interesting in these practices. How do you describe that to our listeners?
So the Silver Ultramind, there are many different topics, many different exercises that is given in the quest. But at the core of it, it is basically a way to enhance our intuition or trust our intuition a little more. A way of, working on that sense of intuitive impulse. So I guess, I have sort of explored in psychology a few things and all that. I don't have a complete explanation of, intuition or what, this thing that many people call sixth sense is. In the quest, actually, Vision calls it as something called ESP, extrasensory perception, meaning it is a way of gaining information that goes beyond our five senses. It's not tactile, it's not through hearing, or, it's not something we see or anything. It's more of a innate sense of knowing that something is right or something is wrong. But this or that. And, like, I am pretty sure, like, many of the people who are listening here also they might have some, instances in their own lives where they're like, oh, like, something happened, and I'm like, I had an intuitive hunch about, like, this was going to happen, or this was not going to happen, or something like that. Now, this quest is basically, that is like the baseline, that's that slight kind of intuitive hunch, but to really build on it and refine it, and then really go to saying, like, how can we get, like, pinpoint accurate information through these intuitive hunches? So that's really the point of this quest. So majority of the quest, like, there are certain meditations to, like, help people relax their bodies, and often it's like Vishnu talks about the alpha state, or alpha brainwave state. So there are like 4 different states in which our brain functions. It's gamma, gamma, beta, alpha, and alpha, theta, and delta. So that's, I guess, the order of it. And the lower we go, the more relaxed and the more sleep, like more is the state resonating to the state we are in when we are sleeping. So beta is like the normal functioning, like the normal state of consciousness where, like, we go on doing our daily jobs. Alpha is a slightly more relaxed state, and that is supposed to be the state where we can trust our intuition a lot more. Like, our ability to sort of have those intuitive hunches and actually get them right is a little higher. And meditation is one of the ways in which, like, we enter alpha state. Like, we actively relax the body. We have a sense of, like, just sensing the body, sensing the inner body, or just sensing the essence of what it feels like to be alive. Like, the mind is completely still and we are fully relaxed. So that's supposed to be the state where our intuition is more active. And the particular exercise that we both were doing is something called the Silva Ultramind case working. So basically there's this website where many people all around the world, they share details about, like, any particular health related suffering that someone is going through. They themselves or someone, like, close to them. And they put up all the details, like if they had any past surgeries, what is the ailment, like what is particularly bothering them in high detail. And they put it on the website. And the task that is given to the people like us who want to do the case working is that we are given the minimal details, the patient's name, their gender, and their country of residence. So these are the details that is given. With having minimal information of that kind, we enter the alpha state and try to make intuitive guesses about what the description might hold about this particular person. Like, what is this person suffering from? And try to get that with as much detail as possible. And over time, like, from our own experience, like, we have gotten a few hits. A hit is basically success. That what we have guessed is actually true, that it's written in the description in that way, like that person is actually suffering that way. And the more hits we get, the better our intuition is getting. Or at that particular time, we had like really good intuition to accurately say, this was the thing, and I could guess it. Like, I could really just sense that this was the thing that was happening. And the more hits we get, over time, after practice, we basically come to understand how our own intuition works. When can we trust it? When do we know that we are slightly out of tune with it? What can we do to get back in tune with it? And really use that, not just in this particular scenario, but in any scenario that we are in. Like, if we have to take a certain decision in our life, then we can, like, this is a very useful tool to get, our intuitive impulse and say, like, this will probably work. And most of the time, it does work. And that's the surprising thing. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it just does. So that's what the Silva Ultramind quest and the case working is all about.
Yeah, and so we've been doing that. We've done like 3 or 4 sessions. No, so 4 sessions or something now.
I think we've done 4 sessions. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the first session, I think, was the best. Like I remember coming away from that, and just got all these hits, and I was like, oh fuck, like like this works, you know. But I think like during the first session, I was actively taking the quest as well. Obviously, since have like finished the quest and stuff, and haven't been practicing it as much, which are why I think obviously when we met last week, my own hits were down and whatnot. But it's as you said, like it's all about training your intuition. We all have this sixth sense, call it whatever you want. But it's in the modern world, and I think probably more in the Western world, we're not encouraged to use it, right? And so it's one of those things. I kind of see it as like a muscle, right? If you don't, or your body, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So we all may have these moments in time where we experience intuitive impulses, our intuition, but because we're not encouraged to pursue it, we're not encouraged to activate it, we then get into our brain ultimately, and go, just push it to one side, and then ultimately, we don't activate it. There's another really good quest on the Mind Valley platform called it's actually called Sixth Superpower. So I actually done that one first, and then I came across the one that we're talking about. Over the summer I was doing a lot of work around intuition ultimately. And this is why from my side that I decided to take this quest, and there's some things that I learned about intuition, and it's like we all have it, and so it's about activating it. The sessions we've been doing, I found them really helpful for that, and so with the case working and like training your intuition, there's this thing of like the magic number 50. I couldn't remember if it was like 50 hits or like to get to 50 cases, and then when you get to this number of 50, then not that you become a master of intuition, it's just a good number to try and get to practice intuition. I hope that I've shared that right with everyone, Ronan.
Yeah, that is true. So I guess it's more like like you hit the gym consecutively and then you build some muscle. So it's a similar way. Like you stay with this practice, do the right thing continuously, which meaning like getting more and more hits. And the 50 hits, that 50 magic number is usually used to indicate saying like, like over time, if someone actually gets 50 hits while working these cases, it can be taken as a good sign that we have the ability to call our intuition at will in various situations. So in the beginning, it's sort of like, like it takes a while. Like if we are not that good at it yet, we might have to listen to the meditation again, like spend 5-10 minutes actively relaxing ourselves, then enter the alpha state, and then, start the case working. And then we'll see that we are actually getting hits. But over time, we can, just close our eyes or just be awake, like fully awake, like have our eyes open and still be at that alpha state so that we can get hits or, get an intuitive impulse that's actually right. So that's what the 50 magic number indicates, meaning that if we are able to get to that point where we have got, like 50 hits, it's a sign that, like I can trust my intuition wherever I go and pretty much have like a fair idea that this is going to be mostly accurate.
Yeah, 100%. So one of the other things that we were discussing and talking about was like this balance between obviously like reflecting. I call it a process of like going within. I guess meditation could also like be part of this. And I was obviously on the call that we had, I was saying that over the past, I would say like gradually over the course of this year, I've become like just more inclined to just meditate, or just like being this constant reflective kind of cycle. And maybe that's like a cycle in where I am in life at the moment. And I think you kind of resonated with some of this. obviously, the conversation we had was like a month ago, so I can't remember exactly what we spoke about. But so kind of on that, what are your kind of thoughts about that? And then we can pick it back up from there.
Yeah, sure. So I guess like the best way to put it is to sort of tie it in with like my story post that meaning crisis, because it's sort of like this is where I sort of got a sense about what this whole movement is about, because until then I had no clue about like consciousness or awareness or like anything like going within, like I didn't even know what that meant. So the way I would put it is that the practice of meditation in particular, and any form of meditation, like any school of meditation or anything, whichever school you pick, ultimately they point to one thing, which is a sense of being aware and being still and going beyond the thinking mind. So there is that constant chatter that our mind puts up. The Buddhists call it the monkey mind, because it's just, like flying around everywhere. It's very difficult to just keep it in one place. And the act of meditation, as they put it, is really to train the monkey mind to be still. And it's really to understand our own mind. How is it functioning and how can we still it? And this isn't something that we are taught as kids. Like, especially in any of the Western sort of environments that are created, like institutions, including like modern schooling throughout the world. It is a Western institution. Like, that's where we got the concept of like standardized schooling from. And if you check with any school, any traditional Western system, like there's no emphasis given to how to deal with your own thoughts or how to understand your own mind, or like how do we use this thing, like that's there 24/7 in our mind chattering, and we're not given any idea or any instruction about how to deal with this. And we're just asked, like instructions, do this, and go out, do this, and this is what defines a good life. So I guess I was sort of trapped in that traditional paradigm of saying like, do this, and this is what life is all about. Until that point came about, I'm like, no, this is not what life is all about. There's something more, and I don't know what it is, but I need to figure it out. So there was a point, like, I guess this was around 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago. I'm not sure about the date. But I used to sort of have a lot of anxiety, which I was not aware of for a very long time. Like, it was something I had suppressed. But there was a point where I was actively feeling anxious, but for about a period of 5 to 10 minutes, I wasn't like, the monkey mind was just not chattering. Like, there was no thoughts, no narrative about why I was feeling this way. It was just like I could directly sort of perceive what points in my body were feeling like what. Like, like I could sense some stress in my shoulder, like particularly this point in my shoulder or neck or this. I can sense my breathing is in this way. I just, like I spent a moment with it and I was like, this is completely different. Like, I've never, looked at myself in this particular way. I started writing it down. I was like, like this is how I feel, this is how I feel. And for the next few days, like every time I felt anxious, I used to write that down. I'm like, this time, this part of my body is stressed. Or this is where I feel some kind of, like some kind of prickling or some kind of tingling like this or some kind of heat. And later on, I went on to sort of understand that this is what meditation truly is about. It is to directly confront beyond the thinking mind what's truly happening within you. And by within you, it means like really sensing your body directly. Like sensing what input is coming from your skin. Like literally. Or what sensation is there within. Like as an emotion. As a raw emotion. Like can you sense sadness or anger without having the narrative attached to it? Like there is often a situation and then let's say like so-and-so thing happened and that made me feel this way. So can we experience that emotion itself without that narrative and then see what happens? And often what happens is that if we truly, like, not ignore, but go beyond the narrative, meaning like we truly observe the narrative and through the narrative we observe this feeling as it is. And the moment we see it for what it is, it gives us an insight a kind of solution to what was bothering us. And then it just leaves us. Like we just feel a sense of peace, a sense of calm. And that awareness is still present. Like the content was that emotion that shifted, but the awareness is still there. And like this happened, I studied more about, what exactly this was, like started meditating properly, had more of this kind of thing where, like emotions would come up, they would give me a certain insight about, often it would be something that happened in the past. And I would be like, oh, I'm still, like tethered to the past in this way. I'm recreating the past in this way. I'm still sort of trapped in it. And the moment I see it directly with that awareness, it's just gone. Like it just dissolves. And it gives me an insight saying, this is not who you are. Like you don't have to be trapped in this narrative. And over time, so like many, many, many months, it got to a stage where I could effortlessly be in that state of, like that quiet mind, like just aware, peace, and there was no narrative. And then I was like, this feels great. Like this is just, like this is what many of these, like spiritual teachers often call it, like a sense of peace or a sense of bliss that's within. Like that's something that is always there, but it's sort of clouded by our emotions and our thinking mind that often keeps chattering and keeps the entire thing agitated. So that sense of stillness, it isn't really the peace itself, it's really that act of observing from a place where, like you're not tethered to something. Like you're not, it's like, it's sort of like a timeless zone that you're in. That you're just observing purely what's happening within you. And that's truly what introspection is, or what truly meditation is. Like you're just completely still. And at certain points, of course, like you find it, like feel it more intensely. Like it's there more intensely. And it's often experienced as I mentioned, like timelessness. Like many people who like go in that state often describe it as, like timelessness, or they often call it a sense of, like they're connected with something deeper than themselves. They're connected with something, they often call it the source, or, like that pure consciousness, pure awareness. So many words are used to describe this. But that's basically what I would just say, stillness. Like the mind is completely still, but you're fully aware of what's happening around you, what's happening within you. And often you can also, through experience, notice that the contents that our mind and emotions generate are going to be a reflection of the situation that we are living in. Like it's often the other way around. It's not that the situations create the particular emotion. Like that's how it was when we were kids, of course, that, like certain situations happen and we were imprinted with a certain emotions and we made these associations that, okay, if this situation happens, this is how I'm supposed to feel. But the reality is different. It's that the way you feel and the way you think actually determine your behavior, actually determine the way you like show up with someone, the way you interact with them, and the kind of things you create with them. So really, that point of stillness and that kind of empty mind, like as Zen Buddhists often call it, like the empty mind is like the beginner's mind. Like it's really the source of creativity, because from that point, you can really set any intention you want. You can literally generate that kind of joy and happiness and direct it towards what you want to sort of create in your life. So if there's a project that you're creating, like the most perfect place to start it is with a clear mind. Like you have no idea about what you're about to create, but you're confident that there's something you wish to create, there's that impulse. And there's a sense of joy that this is the right thing to create. And over time you get, like fill in the details and then you just somehow create it. So it seems like a magical process when you see it from that point of stillness. But at the same time, there's a lot of dynamic things involved. And this is basically where we were having a particular discussion about a month ago, which was that like we have to simultaneously exist in both these realms of, like pure stillness, where we are creative, we are trying to understand, like what's happening and the Buddha nature. And we also have to be the badass guy who goes out and, like creates that. Like there is that creation. We are actively involved in that dynamic aspect. We are like, it's like, like we are looking at how things are moving. We are being dynamic. It's like a dance. and we are, like playing a role in that. Like we have to be completely still and calm, and at the same time be true to the beat. Like there's a challenge that's coming our way, and at the same time we have to tackle that. So these two movements sort of seem so, like different. They seem perpendicular, like it going in very different directions. Like, okay, like the conventional wisdom says, like, okay, if you're still all the time, you can't get anything done. You're not productive. But here it's like the exact opposite. It's like the more still you are, the better clarity you have about what you're creating, and the more dynamic you can actually be. And you can be both simultaneously. And that's sort of like the crazy thing. Like, okay, like I'm actually the one who's still and observing this, and also the one who's generating the thoughts and emotions and basically like the solutions necessary for the creation of this particular thing. And I was the one who actually got the initial idea, initial impulse to actually have a glimpse of the output that I wish to create. So like, it's just fascinating to me how like there's the right way to actually use our mind, the right way to actually like have a sense of purpose or meaning in our lives, which is that we actually get an impulse that we want to create this, and we are actually successful at each step that goes towards creating it. And that's often what, like a sense of passion or a sense of purpose truly is. Like starting out blank, having like a slight idea about where we wish to go, and getting more clarity about where exactly we wish to go, and at the same time just enjoying the journey going there.
Yeah. Interesting. Like, amazing, man. Like, so, a couple of points, obviously, from my side is, when you're talking about meditation. So when I first started, even up to quite recently, because recently I've been practicing more breath work, right? So I found that to be I guess it's like the next stage in my journey, right? Because beforehand, I would listen to a lot of the guided audios, meditations, etc. on the Mind Valley app, or before Mind Valley, there was an app called Calm. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that app. Yeah, so I would use that, and through that practice, that helped me to, again, when I was younger, faced a lot of like anxiety, depression. That helped me to overcome that ultimately. The interesting thing with me now practicing more of like the breathwork side and actually implementing or merging the two is that I'm experiencing a lot more of those states that you were talking about in terms of just like peace or bliss, or because I guess beforehand, because I was still overcoming a lot of these, again, suppressed emotions and stuff, I would like feel a sensation in my body, and then like jerk or something, kind of wake up because it felt a bit like uncomfortable, right? Where now, like the other day was doing this practice, again through like the breath work and like feeling these sensations, and just like, and which I've come to realize is obviously part energy, and everything in my body. And I was like, oh, like never felt this before, but I just sat with it, and just like experienced it and just had the experience. So yeah, and it is very peaceful and that. And so, I'm kind of still going through that process. And as you mentioned, it goes deeper, like sometimes I think to myself, like, how deep can we actually go, right? but yeah, like how deep can we actually go? And then, as I was mentioning, this balance between being in that state and just like, so for me, the whole kind of reflection, meditation, going within, etc., isn't just, me doing a breathwork practice. It's also like being connected with nature, like maybe going on walks, being connected to the scenery around me, etc. And yeah, over the summer, as I was mentioning, I've been like living in this state I don't want to say far too much, because maybe that's just where I'm at, like we were talking about. And I've kind of been, how haven't had like this badass side. You know, there is a project now that's starting to emerge, which maybe could be emerge from me, you know, going within, as I like to call it. But even like through that process, I realized that, and you know, you can talk to this if you want. That for me, I kind of lost some. I kind of like lost some like hope, I guess, in humanity. Ultimately, you know, like because beforehand, I would be doing. You know, I would still meditate every day. You know, still doing the Mind Valley quest, etc. But I would have more of this passion and higher purpose on like the badass side. And then just like we've seen a lot of events in the world, you know, situations, whether it's like big tech companies or whether it's, you know, big food companies, and, you know, I got really massively into health even more than I was beforehand, and just kind of like, you know, that was down to the 10x program on Mind Valley, right? And like learning about like the shit that you know, companies putting off in food and stuff, and then like, you know, politicians, and I have no idea what they're doing, right? And then just like, I guess society at large as well started to, and this was a reflection that came up recently, lose hope, you know, because it felt like what my mission is, obviously part of the podcast is all about like raising consciousness, moving humanity forward. It kind of felt like I was, or have been, moving towards something that is like a losing battle, right? You know, like I can have all the conversations I want on like the podcast, or I could put out all this content to hopefully educate people, or like, well, you know, whatever I do to move towards the mission. But I guess I felt like I came to this point in time where is it ever going to be enough to make the change that I want to see, you know, to make the difference in people's lives? And so I guess that led me to the process of going within. And so, yeah, again, like through this process, I've kind of had these insights, ideas, and observations within, which is all part of that process. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but you know, that's kind of been like my journey, especially over the past 3 months. And one thing I also learned like through this point of time is also like how all spiritual practice, like all personal growth, is also to upgrade our default state, which I kind of picked up on in terms of like what you were saying about the practice as well, in terms of like when you come to the state of peace and bliss, or whatever people want to call it, it's because they've they've upgraded their default state. And so and then kind of connecting that to the thing I was mentioning beforehand, I feel like when you live in that default state of peace and bliss, not that the external world doesn't matter to you, but there's a term within the Mind Valley world, I guess, that's called unfuckwithable, right? And I guess that you are kind of like made a connection between kind of all of this, that when you upgrade your default state through these practices, and just to clarify what a default state is when your state when you don't do these practices, right? Because this is very nice and it's very easy over time when you get into the habit of it to feel peace and bliss and happiness and kind of all these contentment and whatever it is when you're doing breath work, when you're doing meditation, right? Or exercise, or whatever it is. But what's your default state at, you know, 5 p.m. on a Sunday evening when maybe something is in the external world has happened? Where's your default state at? Where's your default state when maybe you're driving home at night, you know? So all of these practices, everything within the spiritual world and within personal growth is I've come to learn is to upgrade your default state. And so, yeah, I made the connection between that and obviously the term of being unfuckwithable, where no one or nothing ultimately affects you, right? Like, we live in a world so often where people may say something to us and we get and we just react. We're not in control of our emotions or how we act because we're coming from this emotional place. So, like I just want to throw that out there to you, Ronan, like kind of see, and we'll hear like your thoughts on that. And that's just some like the connections that I made around my own kind of process of going within over the past 3 to 4 months, and kind of where I've been, which has actually meant that I've done like hardly anything on the business front. To be honest, like I've recorded some of the podcast episodes, probably put out like, I don't know, 5 or something, 5, 6, like really powerful conversations. Posted a little bit on social, but yeah, it's just kind of been that time. But yeah, I've learned a lot through it. So yeah, I feel like I've been talking a long time. So I'll let you kind of talk to that.
Yeah. So when you mention the state of humanity right now, the state of our culture, and it's easy to sort of lose hope and feel that fear that like we are living in scary times. There are so many kinds of things. Just like you turn on the news and you just see one thing after the other that's just going on. You turn on the news like a month later and you see the situation.
Man, like I don't even watch the news. Like I don't even watch the news, So I'm kind of like, like felt it without even watching the news. And so just like to clarify for everyone on that. So it's almost like, it's interesting. Like I'm not scared or fearful for me per se. It's more of a case of like my purpose or my mission, and wanting to make this big change. It's almost like questioning what's the point of it, because is it going to have the impact that I want it to have? Because the society is set up in this way, in a way, it's just such ingrained in culture that actually to kind of shift culture, is it a, I hate using the word impossible task, but you know what I mean? Like, so it's not even something to do with like I'm fearful or I'm scared. It's like I actually want to make and have this impact in the world. So for an example, let's take health for example, right? Because I've come massively into health through 10X program, longevity blueprint, all these quests within Mind Valley, and so many other resources and things that I do, and like learning about more about food, let's say, right? And realizing that, and actually becoming more conscious, right? And just looking at, things in supermarkets and everything has fucking sugar in. And I'm like, what? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But we know that it's bad. We know that it links to obesity. We have an obesity problem, but we continue to allow these food companies to do what they do. So like my mission, or part of my mission, could be like raise consciousness there, but actually through having conversation on the podcast, speaking, whatever, coaching, whatever, is it actually going to have an actual difference in changing that societal norm? And I guess that with that and other things in life, I was questioning, actually, that's what I was losing hope in, because it's such ingrained in everyone's life, that, I was just like questioning what's the point? And so I kind of went more within and just like, actually, I'm just going to walk, for 3 hours or 2 hours a day. I'm just going to do my workout. I'm just going to meditate. I'm just going to like, I guess in a way, focus on me a bit more, because I'm actually okay. I'm okay. I have my daily practices. I do what I do. I mean, I will admit that through not having that mission and that kind of bigger purpose you're working towards, not doing much within business, I guess the 2 categories that have kind of impacted the most from that within my life has been career and financial, right? But even that, like, I'm not somebody who like needs money, like money is a byproduct of providing value. And I guess I'm like trying to work out or realign actually like what is that mission to get behind. So I just thought I wanted to clear that up. It's not even that I'm like sat here fearful, of like, oh shit, all this happening in the world. It's more of like what I was working towards, and just like seeing society at large and seeing all these things that are such ingrained in society, and being like, actually, what's the point? Because am I actually going to change the big 5 food companies, or am I actually going to change, politicians to actually give a shit, or whatever it is, yeah. But so I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, like there are a lot of emotions that can come up. I guess frustration and a sense of anger might be more dominant in your perspective, like in terms of like feeling like, am I doing enough? Like, is it going to have enough effect? Or like you see that and you're like you try to get some feedback about how much impact you might be having, and you just go out and see like still the same sugary food that's being sold everywhere. Like, still the fast food that's just making everyone get obese. Like, why is this happening? So yeah, it's sort of as I said, various emotions that many people can sort of go through when it comes to these things. So humanity as a whole has sort of like lost its direction. Sort of as a whole, like as humanity itself, like every single one of us, we are suffering because we have just lost touch with who we are or what we are capable of. We have all the powers with which, like, we can create great things. We have immensely powerful technology, but we just don't know how to use it for good. Like, we just don't know how to use it for the benefit of all mankind. Like, it's just like, think about any technology that's evolving, and the place where it's being developed the most is something like warfare. Like, it just goes there. Like, the first thing is like, okay, how do I defend myself, or how do I plan? Like, it goes into this mindset that conflict is inevitable and I need to prepare myself best for conflict. Like, we enter this mindset that every single person we meet is someone we have to fight with, is someone we have to compete with. And that's become our, like the baseline state. Like, that's our default state. As humanity as a whole, that's become like the default state for many, many people. And this work of, like spirituality or consciousness or up-leveling consciousness, it's really a way of saying we question the most fundamental things that we fight for and really try to sit and ask, like, is this truly something that's so scarce that we have to fight for? Or can we cooperate and know that there's a better way of dealing with this, so that not just, like, we just don't have to compromise our needs to have all of our needs met. Like, actually, like, we can enter a world where we can create an entirely new kind of system where all of us can be thriving and have all our needs met more than sufficiently. Like, can we thrive as the entire population of the world without fighting? Can we use all the great technology that we are developing in service of humanity, in service of life, and not go in service, like, not let it go into the hands of, like, destroying life altogether? So that's a huge task. Like, that's a huge thing. And one person sort of having this, like, looking at the massive thing that's happening and doing their work, of course, it's going to feel like we're doing a very tiny job. Like, what can I do as one person if all these powerful people are just, in power, and they're so many in number, and they're the ones who are actually ruling the world. And often, like, it's easy to sort of feel like this might not have the kind of effect I wish for. But really the thing even here is that teamwork and, like, collaborating with other people is really what gets the momentum building. Like, that's what we really need. This is more like a grassroots movement. Like, there are a lot more people than we can even imagine who are actually openly speaking about these practices, openly talking about spirituality lately, compared to even 10 years ago. There are a lot more people who have actually experienced something that has shifted them to the core of their existence, that makes them to know that what they have experienced is real, and there's a different way of existing in the world. And that, I guess, is a sense of faith and a sense of hope that we need to cultivate that goes beyond ourselves. Which is that you've been, doing this podcast or doing your business for a very long time. You've had this intention of, raising consciousness for a very long time. And in the beginning, it was a very small thing. Like, you were personally doing a few things, but then you start meeting people who are talking about similar things. You started meeting people who have been, involved in their own ways of doing things. You start collaborating with them. You build something with them. This particular conversation, like, it's only happening because, like, two of us, in our own paths, we have discovered that this is true, and we are coming forth to actually collaborate and sort of spread the message more and say, like, this is true. Like, this is what we have experienced, and it is true that there is a possibility of, like, creating a better world. And the more people who do that, and there are a lot of people who are doing this now, it's like the entire essence of this thing is spreading. Like, this awareness is just spreading more and more and more. And if you even think about it, like, this goes beyond.
No, sorry, go on.
Go on.
This way, you finish your thought.
Okay, so this sort of also, goes beyond just the actual work that we might do. It also changes the way we show up with people who we live with, who we, like our friends, our family, the way we interact with them. Like, all of the shifts, like, even if we don't have, like, a conscious awareness of how this is shifting, just by one person showing up in a different way, the entire relationship dynamic has shifted. So it's basically that, like, the more we grow, it's sort of like maybe a little less than our, less than the amount that we have grown, but it's still there. Like, the other person, without having any conscious effort of their own, they're also growing a bit more because of that particular interaction with you. So over time, it's just that. Like, there are many more people who are going to be, touched with this particular message. Not just this thing we are talking about, but just the message about, wake up humanity and create a better world. And it's going to motivate them. It's going to move them. And even with one person changing, change so many other people to whatever degree that surrounds them. And it just spreads more and more and more. So we have to rely on that, like, grassroots, bottom up power, like the power of that movement, more than feeling the sense of hopelessness that the top down movement, which is the institutions running the world, that they're just going to destroy before this happens. Like, it's just basically a way of, it's still uncertain, of course, but at the same time, it's a way of building that optimism that the situation today is much better than it was a year ago or 10 years ago. Like, even if you can think about it, like, just 100 years ago, a century ago, humanity had just gotten out of world wars. Like, we were literally, like, the entire world was at war. And 100 years later, like, there's a lot more peace. I'm not saying there are no wars happening or this, like, the situation isn't shit now. It still is, but comparatively, hey, like, we've come a long way in 100 years to actually cooperate at this level. And have that faith that, like, maybe the next 10, 20, 100 years, what's possible for us? Like, can more and more people speak up and actually make a shift? Of course, like, that's where the momentum is building. And then that's just that. Like, as long as, there is that proof that you can sense that things are improving, we can have faith that as a whole, yes, like, they're bound to sort of awaken soon. And the more of us grow, the faster this growth is going to spread. And we just have to have faith in that.
Yeah. In the most interesting thing for me is, like, on some deep level shit, like, I know this, like, I actually know this. I guess it's just like, I know this, it's more in the, I'm not sure how to describe it, to be honest. Like, I guess it's partly like actually figuring out, and we all go through this, I think, at some point in our lives, and then have a choice to make. It's like figuring out, like, what we are going to use a better term, fight for. Like, you have people all over the world that are fighting for certain causes that goes towards what in my mind, like, the bigger common purpose, which is to create a better world for current and future generations, right? So, like, somebody in India, could be fighting this cause. Somebody in the United States could be fighting this cause, but it's all going towards the same thing, which is to create that better world. And yeah, to ask ourselves of, like, actually, what is the purpose? What is the cause that I'm going to fight for and move towards, to be honest. And I think it's been more kind of that recently for me, and kind of like questioning that. But like, if you ever experienced that yourself, like where are you right now in terms of like the badass side, as we're talking about? Where are you in terms of that?
Okay, so right now, like as I mentioned, even narrated my sort of journey so far, I'm at this spot where this is sort of like the tipping point between the way I used to live and the way I wish to live from now on. So it's really in that transitory zone. Like I'm in that zone of transition, which is that it's like a blank canvas. There's that stillness that's most dominant. There's not much movement that has started yet. But at the same time, I'm understanding how this dynamic aspect works. So it's really that right now, because this awareness sort of came to me just very, very recently. Like if I have to put a time scale, like it was like in just about like 2 years, like I had this sort of intense like confrontation that there's a different way to live. And there was this huge period where I had to actively work on dissolving the kind of, like the patterns that were already dominant within me. And it was mostly that, that sense of negativity that was already built up, those things that were suppressed for so long ago. And so I spent most of my time doing that work of, like dissolving these things, which is often like in the spiritual terminology, it's often called the dark night of the soul. It's like this intense period where you're actively suffering. Like there's a thing to, like suffer and be unconscious about it. Like, like have that narrative that this thing happened to me, but to actually be in their confrontation that this thing happened to me because of this particular event and this particular belief that I held. And I can actually change that belief. So you sort of, like, it's like swimming in a sea of negativity, but also realizing that you're powerful enough to swim through it and go through it. And then, like, I guess I'm at a stage where it's almost ending, like, that phase. For the past 3-4 months, it's been gradually reducing. Like, the amount of, like, that intensity of these negative emotions are reducing. And it's become easier for me to, like, get those insights about what's the right way to, like, deal with this particular situation, something like that. So that has sort of come to somewhat like an end. But when it comes to the future, again, like very optimistic right now about, like the kind of thing, like the kind of journey that I have been through. Like it makes me optimistic that, okay, like I can do something. I can serve people in some way. And this wasn't the mindset I had even like a few years ago. But now it's like, okay, like this becomes like a core aspect of, like what I wish to do. Like how do I, like deal with other people, not just deal, like how do I treat other people with that compassion, with that kindness, with that understanding that they too have suffered. So that whole thing, that mindset shift has occurred. And now I'm still clueless about where to begin, what to do. But at the same time, I'm like, like there are these small movements that are happening. Like, this particular conversation that we are having. Like, I'm usually someone who's very, very reserved. I suffer from social anxiety for like my entire life. But now I find it very easy to connect with people and actually talk. And for me, that's like, okay, like I see that as a big transition. Like, finally, like there's something I can do that's, like that's against the default coding that I grew up with. And now it's like, okay, like I sense this, connecting better with more people, having better interaction with my family and friends, like that's a huge gain. Like I'm more conscious, I'm more aware of how I show up. I'm sort of, I guess, in a more supportive place where if I see someone suffering, I'm more able to help them out through that suffering. And it's starting with like, like my immediate surroundings, like my immediate, the people who are in my immediate surroundings. And I guess that's the right place to start. Like it's starting there, and only if I can see like there's a tangible difference. And that's like a real transformation that has happened. And that gives me more confidence to go further and say, okay, now like connecting with you. Like 1 year ago, I didn't even know who, like we both did not know who we were. Now we're able to share something so deep about ourselves and actually put it out, not just because, like we just want to share it or anything. Like there's a deeper purpose here, which is that we want to share this message. We want to share the kind of transformation that these practices have, something like that. And as the goal ties up with the motto of what you're trying to do, raising human consciousness. Like, that's what we are doing. And now I'm like, okay, like can play a part in this. So I'm mostly observing the patterns that are happening in my life right now and see like a stark difference between how it used to and how it has happened now. And I also know that sort of like this is a momentum that I need to keep fueling for a while before I get a picture about like the vision about what I need to be doing. So that's where I'm currently at. I'm sort of getting a sense of, like the patterns. Where is growth happening? Tangible growth in terms of like practically showing up in the world and doing things. See what are the points that I need to improve on. See where the growth is dominant, that it can be actually put to use in some way. And then once I see like a sense of a concrete idea that comes to me, I'm like, okay, like I've developed the tools, now put it to use. So waiting for that particular moment, but as I mentioned, like, there's a sense of growth that's heading towards that point of inevitability.
Awesome, man. Like, are there any? So, in terms of the signs of growth, like, in the time that we have left, what are like the trends that you're kind of noticing? And like, I'm always fascinated about that sort of stuff, even within myself, so I journal quite a lot, and reflect on that to see those trends and stuff. Because I think that's one way how we become more conscious within ourselves, or expand our consciousness, because, which is obviously part of what we're trying to do here. So, are there any trends or like patterns within your own growth journey that you'd be open to share in the time that we have left?
Yeah, sure. So the most distinct thing is the default state. Like I still do go through like certain periods where I experience a negative emotion and come out with an insight, but most of the time, I would say around like 70% of the time, I'm more in a more peaceful and just joyful state. And there's a lot of ease in like the things I do. I'm reading a lot more books now, and there's a different approach to like how I read things. Like there's also the sense like, and it's not just accumulating knowledge, but also kind of changing perspective about like how I can view the world in a different way, and how that change in perspective is actually what matters to like go out and do something. So there is that sense. There's that also a growing innate, like some sort of a craving that I really want to go out and do something, but I don't know what exactly it is. But like sort of waiting for that concretization of that idea about what exactly I can do. So there is that urge. Other than that, the most important the symptoms of growth would be that sense of dealing with people has gotten tremendously better. So before, if I used to like talk to someone, I would have like an idea that okay, like I need to sort of talk this, or like this idea or whatever is in my mind, but this is what's important to say or something like that. But now it's come to a stage where I'm more in tune with what the other person is experiencing real time. Like when I'm talking to them, like what is the experience they might be having? What might be the most relevant thing that I can say in that particular situation? So rather than having like a mental narrative of like saying, I need to say this or I need to say this, it's more like, okay, like can I be more grounded, more present with this person, be more compassionate, really listen to what they have to say and respond in the most, like fruitful manner to, like sort of add more beauty to this conversation or something like that. And I see that directly sort of improving my sort of relationships with everyone in my life. Like so many people also have sort of started paying more attention to personal growth and this kind of these kinds of practices. A few of my friends are actively doing that, and they also like talk back to me and talk about like it feels more easy to talk about these things because I too have experienced these things. And there's that like growing connection with many people through what we have experienced. So that wasn't something that was there before. And a growing sense of compassion if like someone meets me with a sense of like if someone accuses me or something or is angry towards me or something like that. Like if they point out something and blame me or something. Like there's that state of like being unfuckwittable. Like it's like it doesn't bother me that much. Like I'm more easily be able to be calm and not be indifferent to the person, but also understand where they're exactly coming from. Like why would they interpret this in that particular way? Like what is the story they're telling themselves that's actually leading them to accuse me or blame me or something of that sort. Like what's going on in their own head.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. So with that, it just comes to me that so some of these lessons that you've mentioned throughout our conversation, I remember them being in life vision mastering. So like as you're talking there about compassion, it brings me back to the lesson within the quest of everyone is operating from the highest level of consciousness that they can in any given moment. And then obviously within the quest, it goes into forgiveness, right? So yeah, like I just wanted to like throw that in there. Was that something that you got from the quest or like from your journey as a whole? Because I think that's something that stands out in my mind.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Like it's good that you mentioned this because like I took the quest a long time ago, and it was now that I remembered that this thing was mentioned. So I guess it was like the quest also did have its influence, and at the same time, like overall, I guess throughout my journey, like I've I've got those intuitive hunches and a sense of like insight that this is the right way to deal with things. Like this is how it's going to be, and I guess like the most powerful lesson that sort of helped me was that before I sort of became aware of my own patterns, I was also doing the same thing to other people. Like I was saying things without paying attention to why I was saying this, or I was sort of blaming other people or shouting at them or any of these things. And at the same time, I had no clue why that was happening. But later, like when I actually became aware that I used to do these things, it was almost like often in this particular domain of like dealing with the past, there's this thing that many people do of being a wise parent to your inner child, which is that you meet your past self and try to sort of shift your own perspective over how you could have seen the situation in a different way and seen that okay, there were more compassionate ways to deal with that particular situation or something like that. And I guess that it started with that kind of self-forgiveness that, okay, at that time I wasn't aware of how to deal with it. But now if I was put in the same situation, I'm more aware because I know how to forgive my past self in order to deal with this in a better way. And then naturally it sort of extends to other people as well because on a certain level, like the structure of our mind, our bodies, and our hearts is the same, like with every single human. It's only the contents that vary. So every human being, because like the reason they blame someone else, it's always the same. It's because like they have a particular narrative, they have a particular worldview that they believe in, and they do believe that like someone else truly hurt them in some way, and they really do feel that pain. But at the same time, like, can we understand, like, to a certain extent, like, did I actually play a role in creating this? Then in that case, I need to own up my part, apologize. Because that's really the right thing to do. But there's also the other half that the other person has to meet, which is that they also had some role in creating that particular situation, which they have to confront and they have to see. But whether they see it or not is not my particular job to do. Like, it's not my thing to force them to, like, own up their shit. It's something they have to do if they want to improve their quality of life. And can you be okay even if they choose not to do that? And that's really where the, like the real test, like where your skills are put to the test. That, okay, you own up your shit, you go out, you apologize, but the other person accepts your apology, but at the same time doesn't wish to change their worldview at all. doesn't wish to deal with that situation at all, then, well, okay, that's their thing, and that's not a place where I should go and do anything with. But can I be okay and still be compassionate that, okay, they're choosing not to deal with this, and that's also okay. That's really what the sense of compassion and forgiveness really is. At least that's the way I tend to practice it now.
No, that's powerful, man. No, that's really powerful. So I'm just looking at the time. We've gone over an hour. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about. So there's this concept I've come across that sometimes that when we don't have a vision for our life and how we want our life to unfold, we can be, and this might be different to what you were talking about, so I just wanted to clarify this. We can be pushed and pulled by other people, right? So it's this concept of if we don't stand for something, we'll be fooled by everything. And so I was curious, how you balance, let's just say that saying, that that idea with being open, with helping others or something, I mean, and maybe part of that is a value of help and support others, right? So then it aligns with it. Yeah, it's just something that when you're talking there, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I've kind of lived both, right? I've lived both where I haven't stood for anything, no values. I haven't known what my values were, and more consciously at least, and being pulled by these people and then these people, which actually led to some of the anxiety and depression I felt, because at the same time I was then suppressing my own goals, dreams, ambitions, aspirations, etc. But then at the same time, sometimes when we have these strong intentions and ambitions, etc., and we go into an environment, are we all then coming with already with a perceived agenda in alignment with what we want, not necessarily what is best to serve? If that makes sense. So I guess it's part of the human condition of being so complex. But and then I think that maybe there's a balance between, not necessarily a balance. Maybe might be answering my own question here, but maybe the formula is that we do have that strong intention for our life and open to how that unfolds, and to be that loving and kind person, etc. But I wanted to get your thoughts, your quick thoughts on that, and then any final thoughts you have for our audience, and then we'll wrap up today.
Okay, so that's a beautiful question you actually put out at the end. So the way I would sort of put it is that I guess everyone sort of has certain values that they actually stand for. Even if they're not conscious about it, they do stand for that. But often the reason why we feel that sense of anxiety or depression is because we feel that the environment isn't supportive of those values. That's really the reason why we feel so depressed. It's just that I do have this value, I do care very deeply, but it almost seems that doesn't matter to the world if I do care about this or not. It doesn't matter to the world if I have this value or not. That's almost the reason why we feel that sense of huge, overwhelming and burden and that. And often this, that kind of feeling of being overwhelmed and that huge perspective that the world does not give two shits about values. In certain cases, of course, it is true. We clearly see that in the world, that no matter how strongly people actually live by certain values, it's sort of they're being crushed over and over and over again. But there's also a possibility in some cases, I guess, I would say slightly more in the majority of cases, that we have been through that trauma of actually having our values crushed,
but we still hold on to that mind pattern or that narrative or that worldview that the world still doesn't give two shits about values. When in reality, like our environment, maybe after, like after a change in environment, the new situation that we enter, like they might actually, like really give uh, a lot of preference to those values and really be supportive of those values. So it's really in those points where we are really holding ourselves back because of a certain narrative that we hold to be true. And that's really what trauma is. Like trauma basically is that we tend to hold on to a particular narrative or a particular worldview, thinking this is going to be true no matter where I go and for the rest of my life. While in reality, it was true, like that particular narrative was true in a particular instance with a particular set of people. But if we go beyond that instance, go like evolve over time and go to a different situation, a different place, it's a very different scenario. And it doesn't always have to match that particular narrative that we held in our mind. So that real sense of peace comes about when we understand that that awareness or that presence goes beyond the narratives our mind creates. So once we understand that and go beyond those narratives, I guess you could almost say we are more sort of directly and purely holding holding ourselves accountable to and also staying in integrity to those values. Like just by being very present and not really being pulled by a particular opinion or by a particular narrative, or when you meet someone and like whatever that interaction may be, if you understand what non being non-judgmental means, it doesn't mean that like the mind is, of course, it might pop up some narrative saying this person is so and so, he's like this or she's like this, and this what this person does, or this is the kind of person they are. But can you look beyond those narratives and also sense that, okay, as a human being, they might have certain values. They might not share those values with everyone. It might be localized to a few set of people, but at the same time, like in that scale, they're still some sort of like a compassionate being, maybe to their kid, or maybe to their spouse, or maybe to their parents, or maybe to their best friend. Like they still have that value, they still have that sense of love. Like I guess it's impossible for anyone to live completely devoid of that. Like to even like the slightest extent, they still have that. And that sense of compassion really means to give a sense of get a sense of idea that although there is truth that like the things that this person might be doing is harming others, there's still maybe that 1% that is also keeping them as truly what makes them human, as like being tied to those human values. And if we are able to really see that, most cases we can just see that, sense that, and know that doesn't personally affect us so drastically that we completely lose faith in humanity. We can still sense that, okay, there's something there. It's not enough to bring about a huge shift in the world, but at the same time, you at least know that it's not as horrible a situation as the mind makes it to be. And in certain cases, when you actually meet the other person and notice that there are these values, and can you sort of speak in a certain way where you break the boundaries that they've created, that the value doesn't have to stay localized in one place. Can you sort of help them break that boundary and spread that value with more people? And some people are actually, like, the journey of personal growth means that people are aware that they have these values and they want to sort of have it being unbounded. Like they basically want to share that sense of compassion, that sense of love with everyone they meet. And that's really, like spiritual growth is also the same thing. Personal growth, spiritual growth, all of this ties in together there. And with certain people who are already on this journey of personal growth, it's much easier because that's their desire too, that they want to like shatter those boundaries that they've created and spread that sense of compassion and love with other people. But with some people, they still have those boundaries, and for whatever reasons they want to choose to stay within those boundaries. But in those conversations, can you sort of help them, like, or even understand more deeply why they want to sort of stay enclosed within those boundaries? And with the deeper understanding, often there might be an insight that might that might come out as a suggestion saying, like, can you sort of like you yourself have the motivation to break that boundary and spread that kind of compassion and love to someone else? And then sometimes they might say yes, sometimes they might just consider it not. But at least like we have done our part of suggesting that that's something that you can try doing, or that's something I notice in you. I do notice, I acknowledge that there is that sense of value, like we share those values. But at the same time, you also sort of nudge them a bit, asking like, can you sort of open that up a bit or not, or just suggest that. So when it comes to that point of, like when you are truly unfuckwithable, which is that you're truly in tune with those values, it's much easier for you to go and spot these values in other people and know how to respond appropriately. In certain cases, you might just see that, know that this person might need more time to build up the courage to break their boundaries, and acknowledge that they have those values. And that's a word of reassurance for them, that okay, like I'm glad that someone notices that there is this value. In certain cases, you find someone who's out there in the world doing things, like with the same values. You merge with them, you can collaborate to do greater things. So either way, regardless of who you meet, when you give that preference to that sense of that, those values as what makes us truly human, like what makes a human life worth living, you automatically tend to spot these things. And even if there's a sense of negativity that surround you, it won't sort of like, even if it becomes a mind pattern, like you've trained yourself to notice that not everything the mind produces is true. Not every opinion you have about someone else is true. Not every opinion you have about yourself is true. So once you notice that, more like majority of the time, the negativity that the mind generates, it's just pointless and it's not even true. And you know that you can notice that and come back to being present and being aware. The more you do that, the better you get at it. And that's what, like, I guess being unfuckwithable is, because nobody comes around, puts a strange opinion that they crafted in your head, and they don't, like, you don't just go latch onto it and just stay depressed, because you know how to deal with your own mind. And that's really the
Yeah.
meaning of, like, you know who you truly are, which means that you're beyond any description, you're beyond any mind made identity, you're beyond any description or narrative that the mind can create to fit into that socially mind constructed world. And you go beyond that and you say, like, okay, like I'm much beyond that, and that's what makes me unfuckwithable. And at the same time, I can be supportive to other people, and also know that when to give space for the other person to sort of notice that they are unfuckwithable, but gain the courage to actually go out into the world and show up that way. So that's really a kind of empowerment, like giving space to someone and not, like trying to, like, that our initial impulse is that, like, if you have the experience of, like how to be unfuckwithable, and you see someone who's quite helpless, first instance would be to, like break their boundaries and ask them to step out and see that, they are unfuckwithable. But at the same time, I guess it's more empowering to notice that you can identify those values, let them know that they have those values, but step out so that you give them the space to break their own boundaries and come out. And that's how you empower
Love
other
that, man.
people, like even with giving space, like even not
Love
doing
that.
anything is actually a form of empowering someone. So it's really that, like, it's dynamic. Again, each situation
Yeah.
is different. Every person you meet is different. Every time you meet the same
Yeah.
person, it's a different thing. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with them more wisely? Like, the only one thing that you have control over is, can you sort of make that default state reside in that higher consciousness for majority of the time? The ideal
Yeah.
goal is, can I be in that state all the time in all situations? And the more we strive towards
Yeah.
it, the better we get at it, and the better, like, the job that we do is, like, in all aspects, in all relationships, we do empower people in whatever way possible when we are in that
Which goes,
state.
which goes back to the point I mentioned earlier around the purpose of all of these spiritual practices is to upgrade that default state, right? So that definitely aligns with that. Ronan, thank you so much. I could talk for another 90 minutes, but then that would be a 3-hour episode and and whatnot. But no, and that would definitely be my longest. But no, if you're up for it, I would love to have you have you back on the show, and or when we chat next time, record the conversation. I think this is going to help a lot of people. So I usually give my guests the opportunity to share their socials or something. I believe you're on Instagram if people want to connect with you. I'm assuming you're open for people to connect with you. What is your Instagram? And then, we'll wrap up today.
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Rohan_Vijay99, which is ROHAN_VJ99. So I'm open to
Awesome.
connect with anyone who wishes to reach out to me. And it's been a
Amazing.
great podcast episode, and I would love to be back and talk with you, man. And like we could literally, with the momentum we have built, we can keep going on talking for another 90
100%.
minutes.
There were so many things that came to me. There was another thing when we were talking about like humanity. I don't know if you remember in Life Vision Mastery, the topic of victim consciousness. They have the 4 stages of consciousness. Like victim consciousness came to mind. So many other things, but I am going to leave it there for today, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
guys, definitely check out or connect with Ronan, I should say, over on Instagram. And I will be back for the next episode of Raising Consciousness real soon. Have a great day. Peace, and talk to you all soon.
If you got value from this episode, found it insightful, or learned a thing or two, please leave a review where you can let everyone know that this show is worth checking out. I appreciate you so much. You'll be hearing from me in the next episode.